Welcome to Tough Talk. I'm your host, Paul Taros, and today my guest is former Congressman Kerry Bentivolio, who served in the 113th United States Congress from 2013 to 2015. He was the only member of Congress who served in both Vietnam and Iraq. He earned a 100% rating from the Citizens Council Against Government Waste, earned the rating of the second most transparent member of the United States House of Representatives, passed 3 pieces of legislation with 100% bipartisan support, and earned 2 constituent awards for his service to the citizens of the 11th Congressional District. A House historian said he was the most effective and successful first-term congressman in recent memory, for having passed 3 pieces of legislation and one with 126 co-sponsors, a record for a first-term congressman. Welcome, Congressman.
Thank you very much, Paul. It's nice to be here today.
So, when you served in Congress, can you name a couple of accomplishments that you are most proud of?
Yeah, I think the two awards we received for constituent services, as well as being rated the second most transparent member of Congress, because I think that's what we need in Washington, transparency. I like the idea of 126 co-sponsors, but that doesn't really tell the whole story, because I got those co-sponsors in less than 2 weeks. And that is by working diligently and being very focused. And it was a very important piece of legislation, the Safe and Secure Federal Websites Act, which protects your personal, financial, and health information if it was ever hacked by a bad actor or a computer hacker. Your information, that's very important today, is that we maintain our integrity inside our software. And anytime we go to a government website and put in that personal information, it should be protected like the golden Fort Knox. Too often we see, almost weekly, there's our personal information is stolen. And I think it's important that we protect the personal and financial information of our constituents.
Okay. Now you're running to be the Republican nominee for U.S. Congress for the 11th District.
Again.
Again. Why are you running?
Well, it's a very good question. I think we need to improve transparency. I believe in leadership by example. I was very effective. We got a lot of work done. I never submitted, well, let me put it this way. Every piece of legislation that I submitted to Congress for consideration came from an idea or suggestion from one of my constituents, not a DC lobbyist. And I didn't think they liked that very much, but I thought that's the whole idea, is representing the constituents of my district, and that's exactly what I did. And I think I'd like to continue to do that because it's not happening. Too often, when you get to Washington, the legislators buckle under the weight of lobbyists, and they're the ones with the big checks, right? They're the ones that help you get elected. I rely on my constituents, which unfortunately not too many people will donate. They won't send $20 to the campaign or $50, and I think they should, but it's, maybe they have their reasons, but I think it's important that the citizens get involved, not only with understanding the legislation that we're voting for, but also in donating to somebody who represented their interests. And I think, isn't that what it's supposed to be?
Yes, absolutely. So what are a couple of the top issues that you see facing America today?
Well, I think we need to build that border fence. We need to have some strong protocols that we enforce for vetting immigrants, potential immigrants. I don't like the idea of illegal immigrants. I had the opportunity as a congressman to visit Eloy Prison in Arizona. And every day they put out a daily report, and on that daily report, it's an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper with every country in the world listed on the page, and in front of country's name, there's a line. And on that line, they write the number of people from that country who were captured by Border Patrol or INS or Homeland Security and placed in the prison. They list the number from that country. And what's upsetting is not necessarily the Mexicans, but the people that came in through that border from Afghanistan, Syria, Iran, in Iraq. And I don't know who those people are. We need to have a strong border because it defines us as a sovereign nation. We need to protect the interests of our citizens to prevent these bad actors, criminals, if you will, or potential terrorists from coming into our country. We need to secure our border. That's one thing. The other thing is I'd like to pass Read the Bills Act. It was pretty popular here. I'd also like to resubmit a bill, Single Issue Bill Act, which basically says every bill we submit to Congress must be of one single issue. Too often we'll get a bill and the first 6 pages are really great, but the other 70 pages have nothing to do with the issue and the title of the original bill. And I think we owe it to our constituents to make sure that every bill we pass deals with that particular issue that's on the front of the title of the bill. I think that's very important.
Okay. I just want to go back. So you saw that there's a lot of illegal immigrants like from the Middle East coming up through Mexico?
Yes, if you check the daily report of Eloy Prison is where they send all the captured or illegals coming into the country. You'll see on that sheet, it lists the number of people in that prison that day from the country that they list. And you don't know the name because they don't always know the name either, at least the real one. The other issue with our enforcement is I received a briefing from the prison officials, and they said they had 26 illegals from Romania come in. They were all women. And once they came in, they crossed the border, they sat on the road and waited for Border Patrol to pick them up. Border Patrol picked them up, processed them, and 2 weeks later, they received a judge's order that they had to report back. I think it was like 6 weeks now. I don't remember exact number of weeks, but they never did show up. In fact, they found them, arrested them in a bordello in Los Angeles. So here we have 26 females that came in from Romania that became part of the slave trade, okay, sex slave trade. I think that's an issue as well. We have drugs that have come over the border because the previous administration wasn't really enforcing the border, even though our Border Patrol, our INS, and all those responsible for that were trying to do their job, but they were prevented because of, well, politics. And I think we're going to suffer in the near future some of the consequences of a unsecure border in the previous administration. I think we're going to start seeing that. Unfortunately, it'll probably be the rise in crime will probably be blamed on the present administration, but it's a direct result of the previous administration's lax border security.
Okay. There's been so much talk about Obamacare. What do you think we should do with Obamacare?
I've always been repeal, repeal, repeal. I have, you know, if you went onto the YouTube channel for Bentivolio, you'll see that I questioned Dr. Gruber, and I asked him, so how much were you paid to be, he is the architect of Obamacare. And he didn't, he's an economist, I think MIT graduate, works at Harvard teaching economics. He couldn't remember how much money he made from the states and the federal government to institute this program called Obamacare. And my question was, so how much were you paid for fooling the American public? You know, you told us that if we like our doctor, we could keep it. If we like our hospital, we could go to that too. And none of it's true. And it didn't save taxpayers' money. In fact, it's one of those things that now the government can actually tax you for failing to engage in commerce. You know, it's kind of like going into your grocery store and walking around and not buying anything, and on the way out, there's an IRS agent standing there saying, hey, you owe us a tax. And you go, for what? He says, well, you didn't buy anything. Well, yeah, I didn't see anything I liked. Well, you have to pay a tax. That's what Obamacare is. And I think we need to repeal that.
Okay.
And I think they're trying to do that in this present tax reform bill. They're going to remove that individual mandate for not, but we'll see.
Right.
You got to read the bill.
Right.
Find out the specifics.
Okay. Now, the United States is involved in numerous foreign wars, which has resulted in a lot of refugees. What do you think the United States should do with these refugees?
Well, you know, there's a lot of countries in the Middle East that are Muslim countries that should be welcoming those people with open arms. But I understand places like Saudi Arabia and a few other places are saying no. So I think that's our first choice. And the other thing is we need to vet everybody, every single person that comes to this country. The problem is if you want to do background research on an individual coming into our country, if they're a Christian, they have church documents that you can reference to see when they were born and who their parents were, right? You can't do that with a lot of people from the Middle East simply because those records don't exist. So you have to take their word for it. I'm sorry. I don't want to take their word for it. I don't take the word of members of Congress. You know, I can't take the word of somebody who is coming from a nation and a group of people that don't particularly like us.
Okay. Do you think the United States should be involved in all these foreign wars?
No, that has to do with the UN Charter. And I have a real problem with making the United States Constitution subservient to another charter that we, the people, didn't vote for. I have a real problem with that. The only thing that supersedes for me is the Bible. And the Constitution is based on that. It's derived from Moses and how he organized his people. So it has, you know, the United States Constitution is not subservient to any foreign charter, including the United Nations Charter. Okay. This is a sovereign nation.
Okay. You know, for our viewers, do you want to clarify? You said we're over there because of the United Nations.
Correct.
Okay. Can you elaborate on that?
Well, not really. But
well,
I could use my
we're over
notes.
there because the UN has
suggested we go.
Right.
And I'm sorry, but and here's the other problem: is somehow or other, to give you an example, in Congress, when I was very adamant about the president not invading Syria, and he crossed the red line. This was while I was a congressman. And my problem with that is you can't invade a sovereign nation like Syria or any other country without an act of war. And my colleague, one of my colleagues in Congress said, well, Kerry, we're only authorizing the president to do limited airstrikes. And my response to him was, so what do you call the Japanese invasion of Pearl Harbor? A limited airstrike? That was a declaration of war. So anytime you invade another country without their permission, for instance, you are committing an act of war. So you can't lessen that. It just doesn't make any sense to me. So I think we need to be very careful. I'm not an isolationist. I'm a non-interventionist, and there is a difference. We have to protect our interests first, not get involved in a foreign war, or civil war in another nation. If that was the case, shucks, we'd be in almost a dozen other countries, some of them in Africa, and we have no business doing that unless it's humanitarian. Yes, I would say let's be the humanitarians and go over there and provide medical services for refugees, help them out, find a place for them to go, vet them. I think that's our job. We're Americans. We're very caring people, but I think to attack a foreign nation, that's an act of war.
Okay. Earlier, you said you strongly support building the wall.
Yes.
Right? Okay. So what should we do with the illegal immigrants that are already here? Should we grant them amnesty or?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
Absolutely not. You know, that's a very good question. In fact, the Dreamers, for instance, came to me and asked, hey, you know, we were brought here when we were children, and we didn't know any better. And I didn't find out I was illegal until I went to college, right? And I feel for them. I understand. But that's not we didn't do that. So there's been a lot of ideas, and I'm undecided on the best way to handle that. But I am looking at all the options and looking at the pros and cons of the issue. To give you an example, one concern is that, one suggestion is maybe we should grant them limited ability to stay in the country. You came here illegally, you want to work, maybe you own a business, and some of them do. They own a business or a restaurant, for instance. Okay, even if you marry a U.S. citizen, right? If you marry a U.S. citizen right now, if you marry for love and the right reasons, of course, you can come to this country with a green card and eventually become a citizen. We understand how that works. But what if you came here illegally? Well, you violated a law. You came here illegally. You didn't know it? Well, you're still illegal. So how do we do that? Grant you limited citizenship? Is that possible? Well, yeah, Congress can pass a law under Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution and grant somebody lifelong status. But even if you marry a U.S. citizen, you can't become a full-fledged U.S. citizen. Maybe that's the solution, because it wasn't entirely your fault. And so that's one issue. The other issue, if you came here illegally, you're going back. It's very simple. You came here illegally, get in line. Go back and get in the end of the line like everybody else. That's only fair. I mean, if we don't do that, can you imagine now everybody and their uncle is going to say, hey, I'm going to sneak into the United States and they're going to grant me amnesty, and when they do, I can invite the rest of my family. And the next thing you know, you have 60 more people coming in. I have a problem with that. They also, I understand and have not confirmed, but we're giving them benefits. And yet we still have veterans that are homeless and medical care that's inadequate for some of our veterans. We're finding out now there's leeches that are long-lasting on our Vietnam veterans from drinking the water or eating the food that was in Vietnam. It's a new issue that's now emerging. Why aren't we taking care of them? They're the ones that actually served our country. Whether you agreed with the war or not, they still were there and they served. So we should take care of them well before we take care of any illegal immigrants.
Okay. Do you consider Edward Snowden a hero or a traitor?
I think when you steal government information, that makes you a traitor. That's the law. He violated the law.
Well, he disclosed what we were doing.
And he signed an agreement saying he shouldn't do that, and that's, we have no idea, to this day, we have no idea what defense information he has given our enemies. So I don't think we're really getting the whole truth, and the public is actually seeing that, but I consider him, yes, a traitor. There's other ways to deal with some of the issues if you have a problem with him.
Okay. Well, I mean, he did disclose the NSA spying on Americans.
Yes.
How do you feel about the NSA spying on American
I don't think
citizens?
the NSA or any government agency has a right to spy on Americans unless they have a court order. Very simple. There's due process of law, and when you circumvent that, you are violating the law. I don't care if it's Snowden or the NSA. That's illegal. Yep.
Okay. Do you think freedom of speech is under attack in America, especially on college campuses?
Absolutely. Yes, you could say, isn't this our times? You can say whatever you want to say as long as you agree with me. You know, that's outrageous. And I think the other problem is there's a lot of people out there that forget what we fought for in World War II, that we were fighting communism in Korea, we were fighting communism in Vietnam. They said that was a civil war. I get it, I understand. But we were invited by DM, to go to South Vietnam, and it somehow got convoluted and turned around. Now, the biggest problem there is, you know, I'm a veteran of Vietnam and Iraq, and I think what we should have done was when Jane Fonda dressed up as a North Vietnamese soldier and pretended to shoot down American B-52s, she should have been arrested and tried for treason when she arrived in this country. Unfortunately, you know, a sergeant or an officer in the military would be and sent to Leavenworth. But if you are a big name and have a lot of money, somehow the laws don't apply to you. And I have a real problem with that. The laws apply to me as they do you and any of your viewers. We should be treated equally before the law. And unfortunately, that isn't the case in this country. I have a real problem with that.
Okay. What's your opinion of NFL football players taking a knee during the national anthem?
When you're wearing the uniform of the football team, I don't think it's appropriate. You want to do it in civilian clothes, fine. You know, as a soldier, I have to, I represented the United States Army and the Michigan Army National Guard. You would not catch me doing something like that, in or out of the uniform. But if I did have a disagreement, there has to be a clear line separating me as an official soldier versus a civilian, okay? But when you are in uniform and you protest like that, you were representing NFL, and look what's happened. Yeah, so I don't, you know, you want your freedom of speech, fine, but there's a time and a place to do it.
Yeah, I mean, it's really hurting the owners.
Yes.
The viewership, the attendance has all dramatically declined.
Yep.
And yet these football players are still have their multi-million-dollar contracts.
Right.
And
so, you know, it seems a little unfair to me that, you know, an NFL player who's never served in uniform, who's never been overseas or even, for that most part, a third world country, can do that and get away with it in uniform. Now, you want to do that privately, that's your business. So, yeah, great, have fun. You have a right to freedom of speech, but sorry, don't use your position for your personal issue, right? As a member of Congress, I have issues, of course, that we are pro or con on, right? And that's my job, is to discuss those issues. And I cannot, for instance, in a campaign, I cannot use any of the videos on YouTube, as much as I would like to, or any official business for campaign purposes. There's that line of ethics, right? So you can go on the YouTube channel and see all the hearings that we did, and some of them are really great. Some of them, well, we did okay, right? But I can't use those for my campaign purpose, campaign.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, you can't do that. And so I think the same applies. There's Kerry Bentivolio campaigning for return to Washington, because we did a good job. And then there's the official business as a congressman. Now, unfortunately, the opponents can use that stuff, but they're not supposed to. And yet they do. And they take it out of context, which we know that's a big problem. Keep things in context, right? But unfortunately, they don't.
Okay. The U.S. has a tremendous debt, $20 trillion and climbing. What do you think we should do? How do we control that?
I should have brought my big pair of scissors. The first thing is, you're absolutely right. I never voted for a tax increase or a debt ceiling increase, and I can't do it. I believe in cutting spending. If you can't, as you're an employee and you have an employer, it may be one and the same, but you can't. If you want to raise or spend more money, you have to raise more money, right? So you have to either raise taxes to pay off that debt, pass it on to future generations, which I disagree with, or you have to cut spending. I think we have to cut spending. We have to tighten the belt. We have to roll up our sleeves and get down to work. There's, I received a 100% rating for cutting government waste. It's amazing. You could make a career out of just cutting government waste, and you still would not be able to stop that debt that's continually to increase. Now, this is the question we have with these tax cuts. Okay, so if you're going to give everybody a tax cut, how are you going to raise or maintain the revenue? And they're not telling us well, we're going to raise the debt ceiling and borrow more money. Well, yeah, my grandkids are going to pay that debt. I have a real problem with that. I don't think that's morally moral that we should do that. I'm not going to allow that to happen. My job is to cut spending and to never raise taxes, never raise the debt ceiling, and cut spending. Yeah, get rid of more government waste. I enjoyed that designation. When I saw that 6 months after I was unelected, I got this notification that I received a 100% rating for government waste in cutting government waste in Washington, D.C. And a lot of my constituents go, so why did we get rid of that guy? He was doing a great job. But, it's sometimes money blinds people's judgment.
Yep. Okay. What's your opinion of Roy Moore?
Well, I think he's done us all a favor by exposing what's going on in Washington. Those guys in Washington have big egos, and his accusers have opened doors to expose a lot of what goes on in Washington, D.C. When I was a congressman, you didn't have any scandals. We had our number one rule is never lie and always be transparent. I had to know that whatever I did today could be tomorrow's headline news, right? So I was very honored to hear from Speaker Boehner. As much as few people liked him, I thought he was kind of funny. I didn't always vote with him, but he said I would never surprise him, and I would never lie to him, never surprise him, always tell the truth, and I would never tarnish the office of the United States Congress. And he also said I had great jokes, so that went a long way. So that's how you get things done, is you got to know some really good jokes. It calms people down. You can then state your case, especially if the joke has something to do with the issue you want to discuss, right?
Okay. Well, with that, we're going to have to wrap it up. I want to wish you much success in your campaign,
Paul,
and thank you for joining me.
It's a pleasure being here anytime. Don't hesitate to call.
Okay.
All right, thank you.